Video games have grown predictable. There's a sort of rhythm or a set of beats that the industry seems fond of hitting, a checklist of what a game should have. Well-known voice acting? Check. Realistic, boundary-pushing graphics? Check. Online multiplayer? Check. None of this necessarily makes every game that meets this checklist bad, and knowing what you like isn't wrong either. It's how we make decisions on what we buy. Inside is the polar opposite of the norm. Going off our checklist, it meets none of those requirements at all. Instead, Inside takes players as far outside of their comfort zone as it can to deliver an experience that's equal parts engaging, suspenseful, frightening, and above all, unforgettable. Players take control of the boy who must elude capture by mysterious masked men and make his way through the world, played out in a 2.5D platform style. Inside's story is difficult to explain. Not in the sense that it's hard to comprehend, but that talking about it will ruin the experience. Just know that you play as an unnamed boy, and no matter what, you have to get where you're going. Inside's stylized visuals give the world a mute, dreary look. Oftentimes, the boy is the only thing with much color, while the rest of the world presents itself as dull, nearly devoid of life. Oftentimes, the most colors that is presented is light coming from the next room, as if to continually taunt the player with hope, as if they're on the cusp of escaping the situation they find themselves in. Beyond just the colors, the entire game features little to no textures, while giving plenty of character to every environment players find themselves in. The animation within the game is smooth and calculated, never once lacking in life, unless intended otherwise. Meanwhile, the sound of Inside is minimal, which is to say there isn't much music at all. Instead, Inside specifically chooses to keep most of the game quiet, pierced only by sound effects when appropriate. The few times there is music is done with expert precision, blending in well with the tense of a chase or the mere moments players have before the boy meets his end. There is no dialogue, no time where the gameplay stops to explain someone's backstory or a villain's motivations. Anything there is to learn about Inside is discovered through playing the game, all the way up until the credits. Every detail in Inside feels deliberate. As we talked about the mood of the color and design of the sound, they create an atmosphere that's both tense and foreboding. Like I mentioned earlier, Inside is played from a 2.5D perspective. Enemies often come in from the background to try to chase the boy down, at which point players must run. After all, you're just a kid, and Inside gives you no weapons, no special attacks, nothing. And that's where a lot of the suspense from Inside comes from. Inside is a mix of genres. While it's a platformer, there are also elements of stealth and adventure games interspersed in. Controls are simple. The stick moves, one button jumps, and the other is used for grab. Despite its linear portrayal, Inside does include plenty to explore, with hidden orbs scattered throughout the game that require more than a little thinking and prodding to obtain. The actual puzzles presented typically aren't too difficult, sans a few brain teasers here and there, but at no point does the game explicitly tell you what to do. In fact, you'll notice this game has no display or HUD whatsoever. There's an overwhelming sense of helplessness players feel when taking control of the boy. Death is never far, bringing some shockingly gruesome deaths to a game you wouldn't expect a title like this to contain. Dying in Inside isn't an outright gore fest, but it is certainly chilling enough to make most players wince and think twice before they make their next split-second decision. As much as Inside likes to flirt with your brain, the story might be the one complaint I have with the game, but to be honest, at the time of this review, I'm still not sure if it's a detriment or not. Don't get me wrong, the story itself is as intriguing as they come, and you'll slowly piece together what's happening and why. It's just the ending. Without giving anything away, I can't decide if Inside goes a step too far in the vein of artsy indie films, or if it's utterly brilliant in every way. And frankly, that means you need to play Inside for yourself. A vast majority of the game's narrative is open to interpretation, and what I take away from it may be completely different than what you do. Inside is another one of those titles that questions what a video game can be, and breaks the norm more than almost anything prior to it. Clocking in at around 3 hours, Inside is the perfect length to dedicate an evening to, and you should. Playdead has created a near flawless game that has to be experienced to be fully understood.